Hello and welcome to another edition of Labrats. So last week I had you guys plant some bean seeds, and I'm sure that you noticed that the ones that you put in a dark area didn't actually germinate or germinated much later. Germination meaning like the actual process of a seed becoming a plant. And that the ones that were in the light would have germinated right away. So right here I have the little seeds that I planted, and as you can see, they've started growing roots. So what we're going to do from this point on is we're basically going to track the growth of our little beans. Don't forget to water them. That's something that I didn't tell you to do in the video, but I'm sure that was, fairly obvious. Plants need water. So we're going to do a couple of experiments along with these growing little seedlings being the name of baby plants, to understand how exactly plants grow and how they get food and what exactly plants do to survive in the world. So at this point your seeds should have grown some roots. They don't have a stem yet. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to explore how exactly plants transport not only water but food around their tissues, right? Because they're living organisms, just like you and I, or like dogs, cats, anything else. Trees and all other plants are living creatures, so they have to transport food and water around their bodies. So what I had you do this week is I gave you some celery and some food coloring, and all you needed to do is put some food coloring and some water and then put some celery in it. So I've been letting this soak for about 2 days now, and you can see that food coloring has traveled all the way up into the leaves, right? And that when you take out one of these little celery stalks and you look at it, you can see all of this dyed tissue. Well, that dyed tissue is more or less the veins and arteries, the things that carry blood around in our body. That's basically the same type of tissues that this plant has. So all those little dots that you can see, I'll show you once again, all those little dots that you can see in the end of this, and that you can see traveling up the stem of this celery, are called xylem and phloem. So those are kind of confusing words, but basically xylem transports water, phloem transports sugars. Now you're probably thinking, well, where does the sugar come from? That's something that we're going to cover next week. We're going to talk about the transporting of sugars next week when we talk about how plants get their food, basically. So that's how they transport water and food around their bodies, is they have this little system of more or less veins and arteries similar to the ones that we have that transport those around. And it goes all the way up into their leaves, and that is how they transport the water. So they basically draw up the water through this xylem, and it transports up into their leaves. So we can actually see that on the microscopic scale. So this is the reason why I have you using your microscope. So in your microscope kit, you actually have a cross section, like meaning a tiny little thinly cut slice called cotton stem. So what you can do is you can actually look at that cotton stem under your microscope, and it will show you the xylem and the phloem up close, and you can actually see what those cells look like. Xylem will look kind of like big empty spaces because they're basically like straws. Phloem will look more like almost like little faces. They almost look like they have like little eyes and almost a smiley or a little bit of a frowny face kind of. So if you see something that looks like that, that's the phloem. You can actually make this slide yourself as well. So if you have an adult help you, you can take the end of your celery and you can actually cut tiny thin little slices of that celery off on a clean stem. So I've taken this one and I've cut the end off, and then you can cut tiny little thin slices. So get an adult to help you with that, obviously. For the adults that are helping, you basically need to have those pieces be as thin as paper, right? Because if they're not transparent and not thin, you're not going to be able to see anything through them because the light's not going to be able to penetrate. So I actually took a little cut and before we started this video, and I'm going to make my own slide, and we're going to see what we can see here. So remember, when you're making a slide, you put your slide bit on whatever it is that you're preparing, and then you put some water on, and then you take your cover slip, and you can reuse these cover slips. They don't need to be thrown away. And at a 45-degree angle, you put it up against that drop of water and you slowly release it so that it covers your specimen. And then you can put it under your microscope, turn your microscope on, adjust your light, and then you can look through. And wow, yeah, you can definitely see stuff. So you can move that around until you get onto like the little dyed areas. Those little dyed dots are the xylem and the phloem, and the reason that they're dyed is because they're actually the tissue that's drawing that up, and you can absolutely see it. You can absolutely see them.
So when you get to the tissue that's dyed blue, because I gave you blue dye this week, that is your xylem and phloem, and those are basically
the arteries and the veins of a plant that transport sugars and waters around. So the next part that we're getting into this, you can also use your cotton stem one that's provided to you, is how does the sugar get there, right? How do plants actually, they make sugar. So how do they actually make sugar? And why is that so important? So that's all that I have for you guys this week. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next week.